Following program does not necessarily reflect the views, opinions, or policies of the City of Oceanside, its elected officials, KOCT, its board of directors, or staff.
You're watching KOCT, the Oceanside Channel. This program brought to you by the caring hands of Tri-City Medical Center.
Welcome to this edition of The Voice of Oceanside. Today's show is important and topical because it deals with so many issues we're concerned about in the area of development, such as traffic, the environment, density, and affordable housing. My guest today is Diane Nygaard with Preserve Calavera. Many of you may recall that Diane was our guest a number of years ago when the citizens of North County banded together to purchase the Sherman property in the Buena Vista Valley. Now, the development we'll be discussing today is in the old rock quarry near the intersection of College and Lake Boulevard. Diane, thanks for being with us today.
My pleasure.
And it's good to be back with you. We were just discussing, it wasn't yesterday, it was 6 years ago
yes.
that we had this show.
Yeah, what a great day that was.
It was, buying the Sherman property. It's a success. And now we have another issue right near it. So how about characterizing that issue for our viewers and let them know what's going on?
Well, what's being proposed is a 656 home development. The Sherman property, as we called it, is now the Buena Vista Creek Ecological Reserve, and that's 134 acres on the western half of this valley. And the valley is along Highway 78 between El Camino Real and College. So the western half of it was preserved a few years ago with the help of 700 local people who donated funds to make that happen. It's now the eastern half, and part of that eastern half was the rock quarry, but a fair amount of the land that was Hanson and is now going to be McMillan was never mined and is still wonderful, intact, natural land immediately adjacent to this preserve. And then, of course, in the center of this valley is the historic Marone adobe. So we've got this wonderfully isolated island of precious resources in the middle of this sea of development with a freeway on one side of it. And that's the way it exists today. And the question before us is what's going to happen? Are we going to see 656 homes in this valley, or are we going to retain the heart of the valley and these resources in a way that people can still appreciate our history?
You know, one of the issues I think that makes this a little bit difficult to grasp is if you looked at this from the air, you'd see how relatively small this is when we talk about 650 homes.
Right.
But from the ground, it's confusing because of the elevation change, and you're going by it a good number of miles per hour, hopefully, if you're on the freeway.
And it really is a valley, and that's probably part of what gives this protected sense. And when you are on the porch of the adobe, which is kind of in the center of the valley, you look up at the canyon, which is the connecting regional wildlife corridor, you can see for miles. You look to the right and left, you have a sense that you're in, you could have stepped back in time 200 years. So when you're in that place, you really feel a sense of place, and you really don't have the feeling of all of that development right around you. It's part of what makes it so very unique.
You know, what I want to do is let's address where we're at in the development process. Then we'll get into some of the specific risks and costs of this development. And then certainly in the second half of the show, we'll talk about how people can be involved. First of all, where is this? Is this approved? Is this in the very early planning stages?
Oh, please, it's not approved, so we still have a chance to impact it. The environmental review process is underway, and it will go to its first formal public hearing before the Carlsbad Planning Commission on Wednesday, February 6th. So that'll be the first time the city officially weighs in on the project. And we expect about a month later it'll go to the city council for final approval. But we're really down to the last few weeks and what's been a 12-year process. And over those 12 years, there have been all kinds of challenges and things that would have impacted the valley. Coincidentally, I mean, it's the same developer who's proposing these 656 houses who built the Quarry Creek Shopping Center in Oceanside a few years ago. And at that time, they proposed destroying the waterfall, realigning the creek so they'd get the largest possible buildable pads for that shopping center. And we all owe a debt of gratitude to the City Council of Oceanside, who said, no, we're going to save the waterfall, we're going to keep the creek where it is. That shrunk that shopping center a little bit. And now the same developer is kind of moving forward to the next piece of that valley.
And just in case people are losing track here, because we're talking about Oceanside and Carlsbad, this development is Carlsbad. So that February 6th meeting is Carlsbad.
Absolutely.
And some of the things we're going to talk about are Oceanside issues.
Yeah, it's very, it can be confusing because this valley cuts across both cities. So part of it's in Oceanside, parts in Carlsbad, but 100% of this Quarry Creek project, and that's what the developer calls the development, Quarry Creek, is in the city of Carlsbad. So Carlsbad's the lead agency. It's the mayor and city council of Carlsbad will make the decision. Oceanside got to save the waterfall, though, because they were the lead for the reclamation of the old mine site. And so they got to make the decision about what happened on that part of the site.
So what are some of the outcomes that you're concerned about if this is approved and built?
Well, we think there's three major areas of impact from the project. Certainly the natural resources, the historical cultural resources, and just the traffic and everything associated with that. Every one of these things, this is not just a local Carlsbad or Oceanside issues. These are really broad issues that will impact the region. Anybody who lives, works, shops, or drives on the streets in those areas, or who cares about these resources. We're a conservation group, so we got involved because of the impact on the natural resources. This is one of the few areas left in North County where we have large enough acres of natural land that it's called a core habitat. And that means it can support breeding populations of plants and wildlife that could become extinct. So it's core area. But, of course, the core doesn't function unless you've got connecting wildlife corridor linkages. So this specific place in this valley is both a core area and it's the critical link in the regional wildlife corridor between Carlsbad and Oceanside, and from Oceanside all the way up to Camp Pendleton. So it's got this unique combination of natural resources, and we've got Buena Vista Creek going through it. I don't know if you've ever been out there right after a rainfall. We always encourage people to go right up to the fence behind Kohl's department store after a rainfall, and you will not believe the volume and velocity of water going over that waterfall. Well, once it gets into the valley, it spreads out 300 feet wide. We call it the kidneys of the wetlands. The water slows down, it drops its pollutants before it goes to the coast and would otherwise pollute the coast. So it's so critical for this whole ecosystem to protect this very special place.
Now, let me, while we're on the subject of the resources, obviously traffic, I don't know, 325 homes going to be half the traffic of 650 homes, so that can be moderated. Is it your position that the natural resource is at its point, that in other words, even half of this development is not acceptable, that it's been downsized as far as it can go? Is that where we're at?
No, absolutely. We think there's perfect, this is a wonderful example of a project where a compromise is possible that can really meet everybody's needs. We talk about the importance of the panhandle piece of that site. That's the area where the wildlife corridor comes through, the creek connects through that, and that's when you're sitting on the porch of the adobe, that's what you see is the panhandle of the site. It's a long, narrow piece of land. And it's only about 10 acres of the 156 acres that they're talking about putting housing on, but it's across that entire piece. So we're saying move development off the panhandle, put it on the eastern part of the site. There's plenty of room there for the houses that would have been out here. It all fits. The planning experts have done the measurements. It all fits on that part of the site. Save the panhandle, and then we haven't impacted the corridor. We haven't impacted the creek. we still have this wonderful sense of place in the center of this valley.
Does that also address the historic component, or are you only addressing the natural resource component with this particular compromise?
That compromise really, we think, works for everybody. The historic impact is really, the historic district is focused around the adobe and the lands around the adobe. And as you're sitting there, it's the panhandle part that you see. So if you move development off of that, when you're in that place, you'll still experience the valley as you always have. I think sometimes people think, well, that's really just a view, and can be kind of trivial. But here, it's the view, it's the setting, it's a historic sense of place. You walk through the gates of that adobe, and it's like you step back in time 200 years. You don't hear the sounds of the traffic behind you. You hear the creek and the call of the birds, and you look up this beautiful canyon. You still see an intact landscape as it could have been for hundreds of years. So moving development off that 10 acres of land and putting it on the other part of the site really protects that historic resource as well.
Now, when we talk about this compromise, has this already been presented to the developers? How does that work in the phasing of this?
Oh, yes. I hate to tell you how many hours we've spent at meetings with the developer. We proposed this. We've certainly worked with everyone. And it's in our formal comments on the EIR. And there are several alternatives. The environmental review process requires you evaluate the project as the developer proposed it, but then you look at several other alternatives that would reduce the adverse impacts. And 3 of those alternatives take development off the panhandle like we've proposed. There's various combinations of things that have been done, but absolutely it's the kind of thing that I think it takes people thinking through a little bit. And of course, the developer, this is a business decision for them. Of course, you want to do as much development as possible, and it's really up to the public will, and in this case, the mayor and city council of Carlsbad, trying to balance what the developer wants with really what's best for the community.
Okay, so where we're at in the influence process, your smaller core group has tried to influence the developer face-to-face.
Oh, yeah.
Now we're at the point where you're looking for public input, broader public input, to influence the political process.
Right. And it still amazes us as much controversy and interest as there's been in this. I mean, third graders have been doing this as part of their history tour. They visit the Morone Adobe for the last 10, 12 years. So thousands of local school kids have been through this. But many people in this area don't know we've got a sacred waterfall at the head of this valley. It's a sacred site to Native Americans. There's 9,000 years of history present in this valley. John, have you ever been there?
Well, we did a show there, so you have to give me that.
Other than that, yes.
But
that was your first time visiting.
That was my first time, and
Yeah.
I lived within walking distance of that for
and
10 years.
There's thousands of people who live close by who have never visited this valley. So we're going to do what we call little mini tours. We'll have.
Well, before we get to that,
Okay.
we're going to do a little bit of video on this
Yes.
during our break. Can you tell our viewers what they're going to see in this video on the break?
What they will see is some shots from the porch of the Morone Adobe with Wendy Hinman, who's a Carlsbad historian, who's going to give some of the flavor of the history, the rich history of this valley.
Okay, very good. You can expect to see that. We'll be back in a couple of minutes to address this issue in more depth. Stay with us.
The Morone Ranch, the Morones used to have barbecues up by the falls, and people would come to this valley. The Ortegas, the Kellys, the Osunas, the Romos, sort of like the Carlsbad Grange Hall. They would talk about crop prices and cattle prices. And as a historian, I know that the best way to preserve something is to use it for what it's always been used for. And how great would it be if this could be preserved as a gathering place, a natural gathering place, where people could hike and enjoy the live oaks and the chaparral and the smell of sage. And we want to preserve it for our kids and for our grandkids to remember the natural beauty that was once Carlsbad. The threat to this valley is right over my shoulder here. There could be 656 homes. If you just see just above that tree line, that could all be subdivisions. And we have plenty of subdivisions in Carlsbad. What we need is natural open space.
Some of you out there think that the only way to scrub down your yard or porch is to bust out the hose and go to town. Sure, that works, but it also wastes gallons of water. Instead, grab a broom and a dustpan. Here's a fun fact for you. By using a broom, you're working out without the dreaded sense of going to the gym and lifting weights. So instead of sitting on your porch doing nothing, grab a broom and sweep. Not only will you make your home look good, but it'll make you feel good too.
Excuse me, madam, but have you seen KOCT Oceanside Community Television?
No, why?
KOCT is unique among the galaxy of TV channels you see. Non-commercial, non-biased, grassroots issues that concern you and all fellow citizens. Programming for young and old.
Really? How do I find out more about KOCT and all its programs?
You can watch channels 18 and 19 on the tube, or visit the website at koct.org on your computer.
Thanks, KOCT, man!
All in a day's work. Serving the community since 1984. KOCT.
Welcome back to the Voice of Oceanside. Diane, let's do a quick recap. The issues with this, we've got the natural resource issues, which we've covered somewhat. Then we've got the historic issues. You want to just address that a little bit more? We were a little short on that.
Yeah,
a little short.
Wendy touched a bit on some of the local history. I mean, this area was part of a border dispute between the two missions, Mission San Diego de Acala in San Diego and the San Luis Rey Mission. It was a source of water for Carlsbad. But this is an area that has history going back 9,000 years. I mean, this is a place where the Luiseño, early Native Americans, spent the winter. The El Salto waterfall is a sacred site because it's been part of their spiritual life going back thousands of years. It's still used ceremonially today. So these are things that they don't exist anywhere else. This is the one place where they are still intact in this area. So that is part of what makes it very special.
You know, it just occurred to me that frequently, I think we get used to a historical site is going to be a building. It's something we can see. I was thinking of the Mission.
Yes.
Right? I don't think anybody would think about putting condos on top of the Mission. Although maybe they would, but I doubt it. Same with San Juan Capistrano.
Yes.
The Mission is a thing, right? San Diego Mission, we know they're every 40 miles. This is ground. And it's ground that's hard to see unless you really take a tortuous path down there. You think that's part of the issue?
Absolutely, that's a key part of it. Now, of course, because the adobe itself is privately owned, that's not going to be touched by this development. But it's the context and sense of place. I mean, you walk along the ground and you can see signs of this early history. The historical experts call it as a cultural corridor. It's a place where thousands of years of culture. When you're in that place, you understand why did the early Native Americans pick this as a place to live. You can see that by looking at the landscape. Why was this the planting lands of the 13,000-acre Agua Gideonda Rancho when it was deeded by Mexico to Juan Maria Romualdo Ramon? You can see that when you're in the place. So it has this context that makes it so absolutely unique. Yes, the building is there, but it's everything that was associated with all of that history that led to the building that's still there also.
You know, one of the reasons, ironically, that the building's there is in addition to everything you talked about, and of course water's critical in the American West, it was a transportation corridor. It's the T. Yeah. We have access north, south, and inland.
Yes.
And that's, traffic's a little more significant today than 9,000 years ago. I guess if they saw one person a month, that's probably traffic. We're talking about failing intersections up and down that entire corridor, failing by Caltrans standards. You know, in other words, most of us, they're all failed in effect. So, how has your group presented the traffic issue. Is that something that's also part of your presentation? Or
Yeah, absolutely, as part of what we're concerned about, because the things that make traffic an issue for people, I mean, it affects people, but it also affects wildlife. The air pollution, the congestion, the noise, the lights, those things affect everything that lives within an area. And the traffic is a major issue of concern. Part of the controversy between the two cities is how Carlsbad chose to deal with the traffic impacts from this project. Their circulation element has Marone Road extending from where there's now a dead end with a barricade by the Walmart shopping center in Oceanside, and there's a barricade on the other end of Marone just off of El Camino Real. Their circulation plan connects those two links right through this valley. They did traffic studies for this project, and they determined that if they build that connection, they're going to have traffic failures at the El Camino end and at the college end. If they don't build Marone Road, the traffic failures are all on the Oceanside end around College Boulevard. So that's part of the trade-offs in figuring out, how can we really balance the impacts of this project. Now that trade-off works well for Carlsbad because El Camino intersection is in Carlsbad. And what that means for Oceanside is they get none of the revenue from the taxes from these houses. They all go to Carlsbad. They get 100% of the traffic. This development would be accessed by Marone Road, extending from Walmart. Then it would make a right turn, go across the creek, and then come back on Haymar, just a loop road through the project. Both ends of it, 100% of the traffic from these 656 homes comes right out on College Boulevard.
So even if someone wanted to commute south, they have to come to Oceanside to get south.
Absolutely. And so part of dealing with that is, you move development off the panhandle, you reduce the number of units, because with each unit you've got 6 to 8 car trips a day from each unit. Reduce the number of units. But we've got to have wonderful pedestrian, bicycle, trail connections from College to El Camino. Our group has talked about, have you heard about this, John? The Waterfall to the Waves Trail. From the Sacred El Salto Waterfall, we can have trails all the way to the coast. We can have connecting trails up through Calavera. The City of Vista, in their general plan, just made Buena Vista Creek a focus area, so they're going to unchannelize the creek, and they're going to build trails from east of Bringle Terrace Park all the way through Vista. We could end up with 35 miles of interconnected pedestrian bicycle trails. I mean, what a wonderful benefit for everybody in this area. So we've got to reduce the number of units, we've got to have good trail connections, and we've got to improve the public transit through that area. Right now, North County Transit just has a little bit of service to the shopping center and a small vehicle. We need high-frequency service that could also serve the new high school. Carlsbad's building a new high school up on College. They could have connections to the shopping center, Sprinter, Coaster. That would benefit the entire region and would really help mitigate for the impact of all of that traffic.
Now, is there an opportunity to tie these benefits into the decision on this project? Is that possible?
Absolutely, all of those things. I mean, certainly the city of Oceanside weighed in and did extensive comment letters and said how concerned they are about the traffic and there needs to be mitigation. North County Transit District has said, we really need support to do more public transit through this area. Sandag weighed in and said, it doesn't meet land use or transit criteria, you need to improve. So the combination of players, to us, our compromise really addresses all of those concerns. And we end up with less dense development, only about 10 acres of land impacted. It can still fit the 506 housing units that Carlsbad wants for their affordable housing plan. And the region could get all of these wonderful benefits of public trails and public transit improvements that would really help everybody.
So how important to Carlsbad is this number of low-income units, affordable housing units?
Yeah, it's a critical one because the clock has been ticking for them. It's not an easy thing to come up with a place to put 506 affordable housing units in Carlsbad. This was the area they selected a few years ago. They put it in their draft housing plan, and the clock is ticking. They only have until April 1st of this year to to have the zoning and the entitlements in place so that that housing could be built. It doesn't have to actually be built, but the city is obligated to have the entitlements in place so that it's possible to put them there. So it's very critical. They don't have time in the next couple of months to find another place to put 506 houses and entitle it in 3 months. So that's critical from their perspective. That's 506 units, though. That's not 656. So reducing that number of units will have a tremendous benefit in reducing the traffic impact.
Who controls that deadline?
That's by the state of California, so the city doesn't have any options about what they can do on that.
So there's no opportunity to involve the state in this and say that the option that you're requiring, in effect, by deadline,
I'm sure
is
every city in the state would has
true.
been making that pitch for some time.
That's right, including Carlsbad, now that I recall. Yeah. Okay. So what specifically can people do? They're going to see this show certainly before February 6th. What can be done as a result of the information we're providing here?
Well, we still know that many people have just heard about this area, have never seen it for themselves. We've never found anybody who comes and visits this valley and says, oh, let's put 656 homes here. People look at it and they walk away and they say, I can't believe what a treasure we have right here. This is something that's worth preserving.
Okay, so number one, you want people to see this.
We want people to see it.
Not take your word for it.
We're setting up some
it.
mini tours on Saturdays. Okay. We've got Saturday mornings from 10 to 11 on January 26th and February 9th, and we'll probably set up some more of them.
So is that on preservecalavera.org?
Yes. They can go to our website and get the details on that. Everybody is welcome. John, you can come back and bring 500 of your closest friends. And on those tours, we'll do a little walk into the valley so they can see the creek and some of the resources uphand. And then we'll do a walk around the grounds at the adobe so they'll be able to see that wonderful sense of place and that history that's right here.
Okay. If that energizes them, or if people are already energized, what should they do?
Then they need to contact those decision makers, the Mayor and City Council of Carlsbad, certainly weighing in at the Planning Commission hearing on February 6th. Anybody who needs more information, we're happy to explain any more, give them more information that they need. What we find is that the more people learn about this, the more they realize, yes, it is going to impact them. It's really going to impact all of us here in North County.
And, you know, the last time we revisited this was 6 years ago, and I hope it's not that long, but it's certainly not going to be next month. So give us, and I realize February 6th is a big event.
Yes.
But there's got to be something after that, too, that people can focus on.
We really are down to the last few weeks of what's been a 12-year planning effort. So the Planning Commission is the first critical date, and then we expect about a month later the City Council will be making their final decision. That's the time frame we have. We're down to the last few weeks where the fate of these lands will be decided.
Is there the potential for another public meeting? Does it exist? After this first one on the 6th?
Well, there will be a public hearing before the City Council. And, of course, people don't have to wait for the hearing. You can call and email the mayor and council members, go and visit them, tell them what you think about this special area. And it's not just Preserve Calavera who's saying this is something that's special. We had a citizens committee from the city of Carlsbad evaluated every open space parcel in the city and said this is the #1 area to preserve. The state and federal wildlife agencies looked throughout North County and said this is one of the most important areas to preserve. And SOHO, Save Our Heritage organization, identified this as one of the 12 most important historic sites in all of San Diego County. So from all of these perspectives, everybody who's looked at it said this is something special. This is worth preserving for all of us.
Well, thanks for joining us and telling us this story. And it's certainly current news. And we want you to decide for yourself. So take advantage of Diane's invitation. Go out and visit. And if you're so moved, take the action. That's what makes us a community.
Great.
Thanks for watching this Voice of Oceanside. And this, like all shows on KOCT, is available for download at koct.org. See you next time.